Welcome to MICO Minute, conversations about collaboration brought to you by the capacity creators at MICO Consulting LLC, where we help higher ed, nonprofit, and philanthropic leaders advance the initiatives they care about most.
Hey, this is Deb, and today I am joined by Pano Kanelos, who's the president of St. John's College in Annapolis, and he also has the distinction of being on the MICO advisory board. So Pano, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. I look forward to the conversation and honored to be part of MICO and honored to be president of wonderful institutions. Thanks.
Great. So for listeners who maybe don't know about your history, I'm wondering if you can just tell us a bit about your story.
My story. Oh, the origin story.
The origin story, the Pano origin story.
Well, I have a, it's really a strange thing to me that I've become a college president. It was not my life plan. My life plan when I was a young boy, 6 or 7 years old, was, and I kid you not, to be a singing lumberjack. That was my career path.
That's delightfully specific.
It was very singing lumberjack, not just any kind of lumberjack.
Right.
But you know, I grew up in a family. My parents are immigrants, so I was first generation. I grew up in a family that where nobody had ever been to college in any capacity before, and grew up in the back of a Greek diner. And you know, I would come home. I wouldn't go home. I'd come to the restaurant after school, and there wasn't a lot to do except read books. No internet back then. So I read book after book after book, and eventually decided that somebody who reads a lot of books should go to this place called college. And I went off to college. And I was very fortunate that my family understood the importance of that. And, you know, I myself learned how transformative education can be, you know, and that made me very interested after I graduated from my undergraduate years. I had a degree in English and creative writing. Into going into education, I did Teach for America. I was one of the first classes of Teach for America down in the Rio Grande Valley in Texas.
Wow. And
I learned that I loved teaching. I was really, really awful. I mean, I was a terrible teacher because I was young and inexperienced, and but I knew that was something that I could cultivate. And so I went back to graduate school and ended up becoming a professor of English and theater, and Shakespeare was my field, still is my field. And then eventually just kind of decided that, you know, maybe administration would be interesting. I mean, I became a dean of an honors college, a Great Books Honors College at Valparaiso University. And then 4 years ago, St. John's made one of its most impetuous and reckless decisions ever and decided to hire me as president. And here I am.
And look at it. So speaking of St. John's, I saw that the most recent edition of Lauren Pope's 40 Colleges That Change Lives again includes St. John's. I think St. John's has always been listed there. What is it about the St. John's education that makes it so transformative for students? What's actually happening on the ground?
Yeah, I think that the key element that changes lives at St. John's is that when you come to St. John's as a student, and this also applies to the faculty, you are taking a full immersion dive into the life of the mind. It's like one of those people who commit to doing the polar plunge, right? You're all in, and it's going, you know, it's gonna be shocking and jarring, but you've committed to doing this thing. And you know, at St. John's, essentially, we don't have majors. We have a 4-year chronological study of I wouldn't call them the great books, but great books, and great books almost all from the Western tradition, although we have programs that go beyond the Western tradition. And we start with ancient Greeks, and we study, you know, everything from original sources. We study science, mathematics, music, literature, philosophy, and it's a, you know, kind of really, I would say, a kind of the sort of Platonic ideal of a liberal education. broad, free-ranging, discussion-based, and you read 200 books over 4 years with some of your best friends. But you're all in. I mean, it's intense, it's rigorous, it is monastic in a sort of way, because the rest of the world kind of melts away. You're so transfixed on the kind of conversations that emerge out of these books, the questions that emerge out of these books. I mean, there are not many freshman math classes in the country that begin with a philosophical question. We begin our freshman math tutorial by reading Euclid, and the very first line in Euclid, the very first statement in Euclid is a question: what is a point? And that's where we begin mathematics.
Mm-hmm.
And
so,
you know,
then you also have these seminars, and they're not led by professors. I mean, they're with tutors. And so one of the things that, I think about is when we're together interrogating a text and thinking about a text, that near as I can tell, and I haven't had the pleasure of being in on a St. John's style seminar before, but it's not about just like mind melding and saying, well, what is the right answer? Like what is this text really trying to say? But there's something about co-creating knowledge and at the same time refining and defining your own way of thinking. So that relationship between the individual mind, but doing it within the social setting seems very relevant for learning to think on one's own. And I'm wondering if you can tell us maybe a bit more about the seminar and how those are structured and why.
Yeah, I love your description. So we don't have professors. Our faculty are called tutors, and tutor is related to the Latin word for guardian, and their job is to guard the program, to be the keepers of this tradition of inquiry. Every class begins with what we call an opening question. It's usually the tutor who asks a question pertinent to the readings. And then that class can go in any direction. It's fully discussion-based. People, the students all sitting around the table together. In the best seminars, the tutor never says another word. The tutor's just there to prompt discussion, sometimes engaging students to sort of shape where it goes. But no two seminars are alike, because everything is a kind of conversational journey. And it works because we create a culture not of conversation exclusively, but a culture that isn't grounded in speaking, but that's grounded in listening. You have to listen. And one of the jarring things to me when I first got here, because I've taught in our program as well, is sometimes these immense moments of silence where somebody will say something and 30 seconds, a minute and a half goes by. And, as a teacher, that's terrifying.
Oh, that feels like forever, yeah.
But it's just, everybody's processing. Then somebody will sort of come and say something. They've been all cogitating, and it's like some Quaker meeting or something where they're waiting to be moved by the Spirit. And so it's not about filling the space with words. It's about hearing, listening, thinking, and then speaking when you have something to say. And the manner of speech is always exploratory, tentative. It's not declarative, right? So the idea is that we have this kind of common endeavor. The endeavor is to inch closer towards things that are true, but nobody in that room has that kind of monopoly on truth. So we're kind of trying to prompt each other to work together towards something that, at the end of the class, and classes just kind of end. I mean, we have no exams, we have nothing like that. You just sort of, the conversation comes and then somebody looks up at the clock, and oftentimes it's way past when you were supposed to end. And then like, okay, well, we'll see you next time. And so it's open-ended, inquiry-based, listening-based, and I think the primary characteristic that makes it all successful is a kind of intellectual humility.
Yeah. So we were, I had the pleasure of being on a panel with you a couple of years ago at a Basis Academy event, and you had given some opening thoughts on the importance of learning to argue and the meaning of dialogue. I'm wondering if you can bring some of that into our conversation and connect it to what's happening in that St. John's classroom.
Yeah, sure. So, we talk as a, as a culture all the time about dialogue, the need for dialogue, need for civil discourse. But we don't often reflect upon what true dialogue is, what true civil discourse is, in the kind of shrunken version of the way people think about free speech and civil discourse today. It's, I have my opinions and you have your opinions, and civil discourse means we can talk at each other for a while without strangling one another, and then just kind of go back to our corners. It's kind of pugilistic, right?
Yeah, that
And
definitely doesn't feel like enough.
No, and the truth is, what real dialogue is, dialogue comes from the Greek dialogos, and the logos bit is really important. Logos is, the Greek word for language, for words, but also for our rational capacity, the thing that animates us as human beings. And so, we are all creatures of logos. We're all human beings. What defines us in the universe is that we experience the universe around us through the means of language. And language is the way that we process things ourselves, and it's the way that we communicate what we know to other people. So when you get two creatures of logos and you put them together, and they're sharing their language, sharing their thoughts, sharing the way that they've understood the world through words, you have dialogos, and dia is the Greek word for both to and through, the number two and then through. So you have at least two people, and your logos is sort of penetrating. You're sort of working together to share something, to add up to something more. And I think that's really what civil discourse should be. Civil discourse shouldn't be an either or premise. It should be a both and.
And this idea of one's not trying to win over the other, but through the words, through the shared discovery, we're trying to come closer to an understanding or to a solution.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there's nothing wrong with believing something and trying to persuade other people about your beliefs, but you have to be open to also being persuaded yourself. And what you find is, if two people who have intelligent opinions about the world, but they differ, come together trying to persuade but willing to be persuaded, you find that they both start finding common ground, and that each of them leaves understanding things better about themselves and the world.
Yeah, and that idea of getting to discover the nuance and the texture through conversation, through engagement, is, to me, it's a interpersonal gift, and to find it with people who are really willing and able to engage with authenticity, it feels fairly rare right now. So I want to move on to interinstitutional collaboration. So you're located in Annapolis. Your closest neighbor institutionally is the Naval Academy. And so I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of what sort of interinstitutional collaborations exist between St. John's College and Annapolis, and kind of what those are, how they work.
Well, I do have to say, the first interinstitutional tradition we have is not one of cooperation, but one of serious conflict. That is, every year, St. John's and the US Naval Academy meet on the front lawns of St. John's for our annual croquet match. And we call it the Athens versus Sparta match. And we have the Annapolis Cup, and it's quite fun. It's sort of, we have thousands of people who attend now, and there's sort of tents and jazz music playing, and everybody dresses like it's the Gatsby era, and croquet happens, and it's a lot of fun. But it does exemplify, I think, the spirit that the two institutions have, that, you can find, even though we're radically different, you can find creative overlap. And we have, over the years, seen quite a bit of collaboration between the institutions. We started 2 years ago a graduate program specifically designed at St. John's for people from the US Naval Academy who are preparing to go teach at the Naval Academy in their humanities department. So graduates of the Academy who have done their first tour of duty or two, who are inclined to be academics, come to St. John's and do a year-long intensive master's degree to go teach in their philosophy department, their history department, English, etc. So we're sort of educating the educators there, which is quite fun. And we have a number of joint events. We have an annual lecture, the Christensen Lecture, that honors a young man who died in Afghanistan, who was a graduate of both institutions, who had been a US Naval Academy midshipman, and then got a graduate degree from St. John's. And we do a lecture, and we always try to find some sort of theme that the two institutions might jointly be interested in. So, something like Thucydides and the Peloponnesian War, the naval battles in Thucydides or something like that. And it's quite fun. And so there is quite a bit of collaboration, but over the years, well before I was here, decades ago, there was always suspicion that the US Naval Academy was trying to take St. John's over because this is adjacent property and they're growing valuable property.
What a very militaristic metaphor.
And there were actually resolutions passed in Congress to this effect and that, and it never happened. But this year, the Naval Academy actually did occupy St. John's by our invitation.
Okay,
so
tell us about that.
Yeah, we with the pandemic, with the COVID outbreak, in the fall, we determined here at St. John's that we were not going to bring our students back to campus to live or for in-person instruction. Such a tiny institution, it was hard for us to get the testing that we needed, and we were uncertain about that. So we were left with a kind of unoccupied campus, and and I knew that our good friends next door had need to spread out their students. At the Naval Academy, they have the largest college dormitory in the country. I think it's 4,400 midshipmen all live in one dorm, Bancroft Hall. But they needed to de-densify, they needed space. So we started conversations with them about having some of their midshipmen use our dormitories. And so we did, and they came over. I think it was 380 midshipmen lived in our dormitories. And it was sort of kind of wonderful and fun to see them in uniform walking around our campus. It was really exciting to know that our campus was being put to good use and we can use it. They were great guests. They had a few pranks. I mean, they're young people too. Yeah. So for example, there
are traditions to uphold.
In the middle of our campus, we have what's called McDowell Hall, which is the most historic building on campus, and has this wonderful cupola, this bell tower. And one day I looked up there, and I don't know how they got it up there. So I know there's a naval flag flying back and forth up there. They happen to be and underneath it said "Beat Army." It happened to be the week of the Navy Army game. So they do on their own campus things, kind of pranks to that effect. So they weren't, I think, putting their flag up over St. John's to claim us permanently, but they put it up there, and so it was good fun. But we have great relations, and it's you couldn't imagine two institutions that are both so dedicated to something so serious and that have such gravitas and yet are so different.
Yeah, so different, but also finding those points of commonality where it's, I've talked to you about this before, and at no point you're like, oh yeah, we have to work together on everything, or there's this assumption that the institutions must always, be hand in hand, but that there are these opportunities. And it sounds like the leadership of both institutions is open to finding those moments and to capitalizing on them in a way that serves the interest of both.
Yeah, I mean, it's just neighbors. I mean, we're neighbors, like all neighbors, right? And you shovel our driveway, we'll help you put up the basketball net. I mean, that's really, that's the spirit between the institutions, and something I think we all need to have a little bit more of in our own personal lives, I think.
Yeah, I agree. So I'm looking at the time, and just really quick, I'm wondering if, for those who might like a taste of the St. John's experience, there are all sorts of opportunities. As Kitty's coming by. Hello. I'm wondering if you can give us a sense of how to get involved in some seminars.
Yeah. So we have one of the missions of St. John's is to be committed to lifelong learning, continuing education. So our kind of core program is our 4-year undergraduate program, but we also have MA in liberal arts program. And it's a 2-year program on either of our campuses. We have a campus in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and in Annapolis. That's a kind of a continuing ed version for credit of our undergraduate reading list program. We've developed an Eastern Classics program, which is a similarly designed great books experience, but focusing on the great books of Eastern tradition, primarily China, Japan, and India. And you actually study Sanskrit and Chinese as part of this program, which is pretty cool.
Oh, cool.
So that's exciting. But in addition to that, sort of extending out from that, we have what we call our community seminars, which are seminars that are open to the public. Some of them are weekend long, some are semester long. We have what we call summer classics, which is you can do a week plus, you can do a week to 3 weeks at our New Mexico campus with intensive learning. And now in the age of COVID, we have opened ourselves the idea of online education at the continuing ed level. It's not something we find appropriate for undergraduates, but for people who are at other places and at different points in their life, you can do St. John's classes, both the community seminars and our degree programs online now, which is kind of extraordinary that we've gotten there, because St. John's is such a bookish place.
Mm-hmm.
We're the last institution in the world that would have ever thought that we would go in this direction. But like everybody else, we've learned through the pandemic that conversations can happen in different formats.
A friend of mine takes those weekend seminars and just raves about them. They're the highlight of her month. So so thank you for offering those to the rest of us so we can experience a bit of that magic. So we're gonna go ahead and wind up now, but thank you for being here. And if people are interested in connecting with you directly, what's the best way to reach out to you?
Email's the best. You can either, it's probably easier to remember, the president's office at sjc.edu. But you can also email me personally at pkanelos, PKANELOS @sjc.edu.
Great. Well, thank you for being here. And as always, thank you for your support of Maiko and me. And I've learned so much from you over the years about collaboration and what it means to be a leader in this crazy higher ed space. I appreciate it.
And I've learned a lot from you, Deb. So thank you. Thank you. And thanks for this conversation today. I really enjoyed it.